Mr. President, on a separate topic, there recently were efforts in Istanbul to advance peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. After 3 years of this bloody war in Ukraine, it is clear that we should move as quickly as possible to a peaceful resolution and the end of hostilities. I wish I could say I was surprised that Russian President Vladimir Putin refused to attend, but I wasn't. Anyone following this war can clearly see that Vladimir Putin isn't serious about ending this bloody conflict which he started. There was some confusion in the early days of the Trump administration, and they were blaming the Ukrainians for invading themselves, which made no sense whatsoever. It was Putin's idea, and he executed it. Let's not forget that 11 years ago, he militarily seized Crimea and other parts of eastern Ukraine. More than 3 years ago, Putin tried to take over Ukraine itself and install a puppet regime beholden to him. With advanced warning and weapons from the United States, the brave Ukrainians defied the experts. They said the Ukrainians couldn't last 2 weeks defending their country against the second largest military in the world. The experts were wrong. Those Ukrainians have protected their independence from their brutality, but at great cost in lives, destruction, and territory. The costs have been staggering. Thousands of individuals have lost their lives because of this Russian invasion. Countless children were abducted from their schools and homes by the Russians and sent for indoctrination in Russia itself. Desperate use of North Korean and Iranian assistance, Russian sabotage, mayhem, threats to our NATO allies across Europe, all inspired by one man, Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia. Why do I revisit the obvious? Because it's been obvious for more than a decade that Vladimir Putin isn't interested in ending the war. Obvious to everyone except perhaps our own president. President Trump promised that he would end this war on his first day in office. Instead, Trump and his vice president publicly humiliated Ukrainian President Zelensky when he visited the White House and made embarrassing overtures to Putin. Putin's response has been to thumb his nose at the U.S. and peace efforts. In fact, already this year, civilian Ukrainian deaths from Russian attacks are higher than they were last year, and assaults on civilian targets in the last 2 weeks alone have been relentless. Innocent people are dying because of these drones and bombs and artillery. I want this war to end, but it should not be a blatant giveaway to Vladimir Putin or driven by any illusion about Putin's long-term intentions to control Ukraine and weaken the NATO alliance. Nor can it be done at the security expense of the Baltic and Polish allies who are also in Putin's crosshairs. That is why Leader Thune here in the Senate needs to immediately put Senator Graham's Russia sanctions bill, which I and 80 other senators have co-sponsored, on the floor for a vote. Let me tell you about this bill. Senator Graham's Russian sanctions bill, where I was an early co-sponsor, now has 80 total co-sponsors, maybe more now. 80 co-sponsors, Democrats and Republicans. This bill would impose primary and secondary sanctions on those supporting Russia's war in Ukraine if Putin refuses to engage in good faith peace negotiations or initiates another effort, including military invasion, that undermines the sovereignty of Ukraine after any such peace is negotiated. This bipartisan legislation imposes a 500% tariff on imported goods from countries that buy Russian oil, gas, uranium, and other products. Fortunately, many European countries have already ceased their dependence on Russia for gas and oil. Behind the scenes and amid brazen indifference by Putin to negotiate, Senator Graham, a Republican, and other Republicans such as Senator Grassley of Iowa have wanted to move the bill forward in the Senate, but keep getting asked by the White House to wait. We cannot wait any longer. Innocent people are dying because of Putin's aggression. Russian assaults on Ukraine have continued, with attacks during the first quarter of this year, even worse than last year, and Trump seems unwilling to do what is necessary to force Putin to the table. My colleague, ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, recently argued It's also time for us to prepare another Ukraine supplemental. Ukraine needs the equipment and the ammunition to defend this nation against Putin's invasion. We cannot give up on them. We should not give up on them. Ukraine's delegation is back in Istanbul today and will again reiterate its support for an immediate ceasefire and call for the further release of prisoners and return of thousands of children kidnapped by Russia and snatched away from their families in Ukraine. But Putin has yet to even formally offer his demands, and a breakthrough today is not really expected. President Trump, the whole world is watching the United States to see if you will stand firm against Putin, especially those other adversaries. Putin is not our friend, and is not a friend of the United States. You do not want Mr. President, you do not want our legacy to be appeasement and surrender to Russia and a weakening of our transatlantic security. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Suggest the episode quorum.